there was more from Paul's past that voters may not know about. Paul has said racism is what lies at the heart of America's drug laws, and that those laws are designed to work against blacks, Hispanics, and Asians, claiming doctors wanted a monopoly on drugs and set about establishing one by criminalizing drugs after 1914. If I can here, I want to take us back a little bit to 1988. That's when Ron Paul made a campaign speech on this topic while running for president as a libertarian. Let me have you listen to this first.
What was so bad about the period from 1776 to 1914? Well, the doctors complained a little bit because it was in the 20th century. The doctors, like all business people, decided that there ought to be a monopoly. That if you wanted a little bit of codeine in your cough medicine, it would be much better if you come to me so I can charge you $25 for a prescription, and then you can decide whether or not you need codeine in your cough syrup because, of course, that's good for business, good for the doctor. So this is what happened. Before the 20th century, there was none of that. And it was the medical profession as well as many other groups that agitated for the laws. And there's a pretty good case made that this same concept was built in with racism as well. We do know that opium was used by the Chinese, and the Chinese were not welcomed in this country. We do know that the blacks at times use heroin, opium, and the laws have been used against them. There has been times that it's been recognized that the Latin Americans used marijuana and the laws have been written against them. But lo and behold, the drug that inebriates most of the members of Congress has not been touched because they're over there drinking alcohol.
Ryan Grim is Washington bureau chief for the Huffington Post, and he posted a column on this topic just yesterday. He is also the author of This Is Your Country on Drugs. Ryan, let me start with this. Where do Congressman Paul's views here on racism and drugs sit in context? Are they radical? And is he right?
Well, there's kind of two ways to think about this, and the first is maybe the easiest. You can think about the consequences of the drug policy. If the consequences of a policy are obviously racist, then the policy itself, continuing that policy, is racist. And there's no question that the results of the drug policy are racist. You have a disproportionate impact on blacks and Hispanics than you do on whites. There's just no way of squaring the numbers. So, but the other way to do is to look at the actual history, which Paul was referring to, and there you find that he was actually pretty close to the truth too. We can take what he said about the Chinese. He said that we banned opium because Chinese were scapegoated and Chinese were using it, and that, if you look at the history, is more or less true. What he didn't mention, but he probably also knows, is that opium was actually in use, and it was a middle-class drug throughout the early 1800s. It
was already here.
Well before the Chinese were here. In 1850, the census recorded less than 1,000 people of Asian descent here in the United States. They only came in the 1870s and 80s because, by force and fraud, we brought them over here to build the Transcontinental Railroad. And so at that point, that's when we started criminalizing opium. But before that, it was a respectable thing, and in fact, William Delano Roosevelt was himself an opium importer. So
there's some history to this then, that you actually outline in your article, and how his support for this may bring up some question. In fact, what do these sorts of remarks do for Ron Paul as we look back in history here, whether it's the general or the primary?
Well, it might blur things a little bit for him, which can only be to his benefit, because for the last week or so he's been getting hammered as a racist for having his name on a newsletter that did have some genuinely derogatory and racist things to say about, as you said, Jews, Africans, Americans, etc. So if that gets muddied at all, it might redound to his benefit. But who knows? Maybe there are some closet racists out there who will ignore that part, listen to the earlier part, and then actually come out and vote for him. It's certainly impossible to poll that.
So nobody's
going to be honest with a pollster about that.